He is a senior writer for Front Office Sports, and he is the host of the Front Office Sports Today podcast. We welcome Owen Poindexter onto Hoopsology. Welcome, Owen.
Hi, Justin. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on to the show. Really appreciate it. Our show dives into kind of the major headlines about basketball, but also about basketball culture as well, and everything that surrounds it. That includes media rights, and I think your site and yourself is on the leading edge of what's happening currently. So I want to read you one of your tweets that you recently put out. I'm just curious about this. I think it really stood out to me. You said, "quote This month, the month of June, is going to set a decades." Of changes in motion for the NBA. So right now, the draft hasn't taken place after recording of this podcast, and the TV rights have not been officially finalized. But the finals is over with the Boston Celtics winning their 18th championship. Uh, at this point, just seeing how the finals has played out, and just now, JJ Redick got hired as Lakers head coach. Some trades have kind of gone through today. What do you make of just the league overall as just a television product, the arena product, just overall as in terms of kind of the welfare of the entire league?
I mean, it wasn't quite the finals that the NBA was hoping for, just because it went 5 games, and the Celtics go up 3-0, and it's like, okay, we all think we know where this is going. Uh, but I think overall, it's an incredibly healthy league. I mean, I said it's not what they wanted, but they got two big market teams. The Celtics. I think that's a team that the league always wants to be involved and be relevant. The Mavs obviously are a major market with Mark Cuban's not the majority owner anymore, but he's one of their more visible owners. Still controls the basketball side of things, and you just got a ton of teams that are interesting and competitive. I mean, at the start of the year, we were talking about the Suns and the Sixers and the Bucks, and then at the end of the year, it's like the Knicks and the Pacers and the Thunder, and it's a very competitive league. It's a very compelling league, I think. There's still things that you might want to tweak, like some people still have the perception that the first 3 quarters don't matter that much. That it just kind of comes down to the very end. Regular season, kind of the same thing. That's why they have the in-season tournament. It's to get people like more engaged in November, December. So yeah, there are tweaks you can make, but these are the sorts of tweaks that a healthy league is trying to make. Not the how do we get more young people involved? How do we get more women watching? I feel like it's not like the NBA doesn't care about those things, but they're in very good shape on a lot of those metrics. So yeah, I think we sort of head into what'll probably be a pretty transformative period in a very healthy place.
So, what matters more? Because Matt and I, where we're talking, we weren't really impressed by the finals or kind of the playoffs as a whole from a competitive standpoint. But if you look at the ratings, game four is pretty low, game five rebounded. It has seemed from an interest standpoint, like you were saying, lots of great storylines, but the product in the court wasn't necessarily super duper compelling, lots of blowouts at some point. So, is it more important just to have like really great storylines, stars, and just buzz compared to actual just super competitive basketball that's super close every game, you think?
I mean, ideally you have both. When
Sure.
it's like LeBron and Steph duking it out, people tune in. And even at this later stage in their careers, um, I think the competitive games eventually become these great narratives that people tune in for. That they keep fans around, and that's I think why you see the finals start to dip when it's 3-0 Celtics. Do you really need to watch Game 4? And obviously, if you're a fan, you want to see him finish the deal. If you're just like just a kind of general basketball fan, if once you kind of feel like who's going to win, you might do other things with your time. So yeah, it matters if it's not a competitive game on the court. And yeah, even the game the Mavs won was they won by like 30 or 40 points. Um, so yeah, obviously you can't just have blowout after blowout. But I think the league, most leagues kind of adjust on their own to that stuff. And it's something the league has to keep an eye on if teams are, putting all their stars in one game and saying, then now you all get a break for the next game and you have these big fluctuations. That's an issue, and one that they've sort of tried to address. But I think if one team's blowing everyone out, I mean, look how comfortable the Nuggets were winning last year's finals. I was thinking like, okay, maybe this is just the team now. And then the Wolves this year, all of a sudden, I was like, okay, are they going to take over? And so Yeah, I mean, I think the finals was a little underwhelming. Up to that point, I thought it was, it was a pretty compelling product. I thought, Knicks Pacers was pretty exciting. Yeah, Wolves Mavs was not how I thought it was going to go. Yeah, I thought there was enough there. The finals itself, yeah, I guess not so much. But the Celtics are just a good team, and the Mavs couldn't quite figure them out except for that one game. And so, yeah, that's going to happen sometimes, I guess. Sometimes a team is just, you know, makes it not very competitive. But now they're a target, and that's a good story too. Can someone knock off the Celtics? Can they keep it going? How are they going to fit everything under the cap? There's always more, right? So yeah, and an individual series is always just kind of a roll of the dice. But I think the teams, they don't want to just keep getting crushed. So I think we'll see adjustments. I think the league tends to keep itself interesting.
Absolutely. Oh, and I'm curious your perspective just about TV ratings in 2024, because we always have, this discourse, it seems like, online, like, oh, the league is getting weaker because TV ratings are slipping. But we know that there's kind of more pieces of the pie now than just TV ratings that factor in. But how do you look at and kind of, I guess, analyze what TV ratings are saying in 2024? Like when we hear, what Justin mentioned with like game 4, ratings are down a little bit. Lowest I think they had been since like the bubble finals. But grand scheme of things, I mean, sports kind of marches on. So how do you factor in TV ratings?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think not an easy one these days. Because yeah, I mean, one, I am not the first to say the media is more fractured than it's ever been. Also, if your ratings are not amazing, but you know tens of millions of people watch some highlights on YouTube, or they watch some dunks on TikTok, or they like some like post game comment goes viral and that starts a whole thing. Is the game of media a success or not? And I feel like every league, every advertiser, everyone's trying to figure this out. Obviously, TV ratings in some ways there's no substitute for them because yeah, your State Farm commercial comes on, and how many eyeballs see that? And the players have their logos on their jerseys. How many people see those? These are sort of the more quantifiable things, and those can be quantified at least partly by TV ratings. But again, those highlights matter there too. Um, but yeah, so leagues have to kind of in this day and age think about this whole picture and decide like, are we okay with people not watching the whole thing, because most people are not watching whole games these days.
Yeah.
But if we can get those impressions, if we can get our stars' names out there, if we get people caring about this league, I feel like that matters for the long term. But what is it going to mean for how much you can sell your ads for? Obviously, the leagues themselves are not selling the ads; it's the networks. But that then makes it so the league can sell those games for
Sure.
more dollars. I think in this day and age, if you're kind of holding steady on your TV ratings, you're doing just fine.
Mhm.
Because one, there's that fragmentation. There's so many other places that people are interacting with the league. There's overseas television watching as well. I just feel like, and yeah, if as long and also sports is like the glue. Like there aren't shows that are like holding whole networks together. So if you can just say like, look, like, there's still only one NBA. I mean, there's the NBA, there's the NFL. You can throw in baseball and hockey and soccer if you want. But these are so valuable to the networks because they bring this whole cross section of the country. They bring all sorts of folks together to watch one thing at the same time, and everything else is just like, well, like yeah, I'll binge watch the show my friends told me about on the weekend when I feel like it. Everything else is just kind of like off in its own little silo. Sports are the one thing where you get a live audience, and that live audience like is it's there for that time, because once the game's over, everyone knows the score. There's like replay doesn't, it's
Right.
very hard to watch a game that's already happened. So yeah, sports have this unique value, and I think as long as you're kind of showing that audience is still showing up, I think you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, it's fascinating because every time these TV rights deals approach and come up, and this time around, we're hearing numbers in the many billions in terms of these media rights for the NBA. It's just always a little bit shocking to see TV ratings either maintaining or diminishing. I mean, that tells me big picture that TV ratings are much less important than they used to be, given all those other things that you mentioned, YouTube, social media. But then also, I think there may just be like this sort of prestige for your network in carrying these sports leagues as well.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, right? How like you look at the ratings, it's like, they're okay. Yeah, they're sort of down from last year. Like they sort of go up and then they go down again. Like the in-season tournament causes some excitement, but then like, how's the rest of the regular season? It's fine. But the media rights tripled. Like it's
Yeah,
so yeah, it is interesting, and I think that prestige thing and just like okay, like think of all the streaming services that are out there right now. I mean, in some ways, it's consolidated, but you've got Peacock, Paramount, Amazon, Google. I mean, by Google, I mean YouTube. All of them. Apple. Which one are you going to subscribe to? All of them? Probably not. But are you an NBA fan? Like, okay, then like you're probably going to want Amazon starting next year. If the rumors are true, you're probably going to want Peacock. You're going to want ESPN's weirdly divided up into a bunch of different ones, but you're probably going to want some piece of ESPN. And same goes for like the NFL, MLB. It's these networks are trying to say like, look, like maybe we have some show that you love and we're going to keep you around for that, or maybe we can just say the NBA, and you're like, okay, well, I don't really know the difference between Peacock and Paramount, but I'll just take the one that has the NBA. So I think we're in this time of like, not all of these services are necessarily going to survive, or they're going to merge, or it's all kind of up in the air. So so a lot of networks are willing to sort of on the surface overpay for the eyeballs, because they want to be the one you associate with these major properties.
So I want to ask, and you're an expert in this field, so I want to get your opinion on this. It seems like a lot of fans, a lot of basketball pundits, they seem to focus on just the post game, pre game coverage of multiple sports, and basketball's no exception. So if it plays out that Warner Brothers Discovery loses the NBA rights, and you have ESPN, NBC, and Amazon gaining them. I guess my question is from a production standpoint. Basically, a lot's gonna be made of like where's inside the NBA gonna go, what's gonna happen with ESPN's NBA countdown with JJ Redick being gone, and just everything that happened with Doc Rivers and Tim Fire and Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson. Do you think it's just overrated, this entire talk? Like when it comes down to quantifying like actual results in terms of viewers, in terms of this whole discussion, it seems like it's just a crisis in terms of who gets hired, who gets fired, who's on the coverage, who's not. I see Doris Burke trending. When she's on there, there seems to be a huge debate in terms of if she's worthy as being on the broadcast. It is ridiculous. Like I think from your perspective, is it just kind of an overblown thing just on the internet that's not really quantifiable in reality, just in terms of just the viewers on the actual product of the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it certainly gets overblown on the internet. Um, and I think the reason it gets overblown is because you have a very small number of positions when you like add up everything. Everyone who's like calling national games, doing these national like pre and post game shows. All your inside the NBA and all of its of equivalents, and so you have all this attention on a very small number of people. And when one of them's going away, is Barkley going? Now Barkley is going away after next year. JJ Redick's going away. For each one of these is like, oh, they're gone. What happens now? And yes, it's a big deal to these networks, and some of them can get pretty enormous contracts. At the same time, because it's a small number, you can be nice and selective on. If you're NBC, let's say they get NBA media rights. Not a done deal, but it looks like that's going to happen. You have a whole world of unsigned talent, media talent, who can be your people, and you can try folks out. You can say, let's try these folks. They seem good. Let's see if the audience responds. Like this is going to be probably an 11-year deal, so they've got time to figure this out, and they can, if they don't start with Barkley and Shaq and whoever else, they can find folks. Maybe even someone who's in the NBA right now might be their big star. I mean, who knew that Redick was going to be this big guy who, is calling the finals and then going on to coach the Lakers all of a sudden? So yes, it matters, and yes, it's going to be a big topic of discussion. We're going to cover it too at Front Office Sports, but at the same time, I think they're going to work it out. I think these networks are savvy enough to eventually, even if they don't get it right the first time, they'll find good talent.
I think what's odd too, not so much in the NFL, but in the NBA, there's been so much transition and turnover in these broadcasting positions compared to like when I was watching basketball in the 90s. I mean, it seemed like, yeah, there were some broadcast teams that mixed up, but a lot of them you were expecting every single year. You knew like Bob Costas is going to be in there commenting on the finals and things like that. So I wonder if it's kind of become less important simply because it's like musical chairs in there at least the past 10 years or so in the NBA, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like sometimes there are big names that bring an audience with them, but I think most fans are there for the game, and they'll watch the pregame show, whoever's on there. And yeah, maybe I'm making this sort of sound too superfluous and light, but and I think the inside the NBA is sort of a unique thing in this whole world, because Barkley and Shaq and Ernie and Kenny Smith. I think they've got this. They are kind of like the long-term ones now, and they've got this good groove. And Barkley's good at making headlines once in a while, and Shaq says funny things. And I think the rest is more fungible than we tend to give it credit for. Even like the Mike Breens and Doris Burks of the world, like they're great. I love them. If they say, you know what, I'm done. I'm gonna go like on a cruise somewhere and not come back. They'll find someone else. There's a lot of good people. I mean, think of all the people calling like local NBA games now, or I mean, for their local regional sports networks. Sure, there's tons of great talent there, and life finds a way here, and they'll when the current generation goes. I mean, it's nice to hear those familiar voices, right? Even like Marv Albert's voice, Bob Costas' voice. It still like can bring back this like nostalgia from yesteryear. And same with a lot of the folks that are doing it now. So yeah, it matters, but if you have good people and they have the staying power to stick around, then like they'll be the voice for another generation, and like that's fine too.
Yeah. I guess like the thing I just wonder out loud, this is rhetorical, but if people are staying like once inside the NBA goes, if next season is in fact the last season for it, is part of that opportunity to build nostalgia, like going away with it. If they don't find or just get back into a regular routine with a long-term broadcast team. I mean, impossible to know that. We haven't talked about it on the show yet. Want to get your thoughts just on the Charles Barkley situation, just what you've seen. I mean, we've had like the Draymond side who knows Charles Barkley a little bit here and there. They've worked together saying, I think Charles is just in his feelings, but I don't know. I could see Charles Barkley just walking away like that, as he claims he is after next season. Do you have any sort of like predictions, inclinations from what you've seen so far? Of course, with the understanding it's impossible to know deep down what Charles Barkley is doing.
Yeah, not really. I mean, but my mind has sort of gone down each of these paths of like, I mean, probably he's just telling the truth. Like he has decided, he's not a young guy. He certainly could keep going, but he could also, he's got plenty of money at this point. He could say, that I'm fine with this. Maybe he's got something else lined up. Maybe he's been talking to people on the side or saying, you're going to have a hit podcast. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at all if he goes from TNT to the Barkley Show, with, just on YouTube or whatever, or on a network. Or maybe he just does his own thing for a bit, and then NBC or Amazon says, we'd really love to have you on our show, and here's $20 million per year to make you even more interested in that idea. That could happen. I don't know if it's going to happen the very first year of the deal. Maybe he's truly done. When he said, another possibility I considered was maybe he knows that that Warner Bros. Discovery is out. I mean, there is some talk that they could get a smaller package, or still end up with some piece of the NBA. But yeah, then do you keep that super team together for a smaller package? It gets a little dicey. So I was considered, could maybe he knows that this is a done deal, and he wants to kind of go out on his own terms. At the same time, the way he phrased it was, whatever happens, but also he named, I think it was Vince Carter, and I forget who he said, but it was Warner Bros. Discovery talent. There's people kind of under contract with them, which made me think, like, okay, he's not saying I'm out and whatever happens, and then I don't know. It felt like he was leaving the door open for the NBA to still be on TNT. So I don't know. I don't know is the short answer. But I would not at all be all that shocked if sometime later in the decade we see Charles Barkley on something similar to Inside the NBA.
Yeah, understandable. And I think I feel much the same way as you do, because simultaneously it's also a brilliant negotiating tactic,
right?
As well,
yeah.
to announce your retirement.
Yeah, right. Now you don't just have to sign the obvious free agent, and it's not being like, which one's he going to go to? It's you got to. He introduces this other competitor, which is just, I retire, I go live my life. Like you have to pay me out of that. So yeah, maybe it's that.
So, want to ask you about JJ Redick, just from a media perspective. Announced that he'll be the head coach of the Lakers. No head coaching experience other than coaching, I think, his son's team, and has amassed this podcasting empire. We've seen a lot of athletes get into the podcast media space. Is him being hired into an actual head coaching role just an anomaly, do you think? Or do you think this will be a trend where athletes will follow in his footsteps? Hey, it's my foot in the door. I'll get to showcase my knowledge of not only just basketball, but other sports. And then they'll get this kind of like an audition, basically. And then I'll kind of get my foot in the door a different way. Do you think this is kind of breaking new ground for other athletes? And is that a good thing if you see it that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of breaking new ground, especially because the podcast, it's not just a podcast, it's a podcast with LeBron James. And that's a little weird. And I mean, he has to now prove that like this isn't just a favor to LeBron, or like if it is, he's also worthy of being the head coach of a team that I think still has title aspirations or something like that. And it's not just like the LeBron retirement tour where they draft his son and hire his friend. But I mean, the media to coaching move that's been done before. And so is just like the player to coaching move. So I mean, but media is a chance to show that you're a thoughtful person. You can deliver a speech. you can present yourself. You understand the game, and podcasts are just a big part of the media now. It is kind of it's unique in that if it's different from being on like an Inside the NBA type show, because it's not this national platform, it's your platform, and you can bring on players. You might be talking to current players, you might even be co-hosting with a current player, and so but also you've got all this airtime that you can have as much airtime as you want. It's your podcast. You don't have to break for a commercial, or if you do, you can just keep talking for another hour if you feel like it. So it kind of makes sense. It's not something I predicted by any means, but it makes enough sense that people would start going from podcast to head coaching. And of course, it's not just the podcast. It's he does have a national media presence, so it's all a little funny because of the LeBron connection. But it makes enough sense. I have no idea if it's going to work. I don't think anyone does. He hasn't done this before. And it's it's a high profile hire. In some ways, it would make more sense to be an assistant coach or a college coach or something. But he's going straight to the Lakers, and we'll see if it works.
It's interesting because lately there's this parallel both in broadcasting and coaching. I don't know if it's so much the case in the NFL. Certainly on the broadcasting side it is, but it seems like there's increased value lately in the NBA if you're only a few years out of playing and you go to being a coach, like Jason Kidd, Steve Nash. Granted, they've had mixed results, but hey, Jason Kidd was just in the finals, so that's cool. Yeah. We'll see what JJ Redick does. And then same thing, I mean, the broadcasting side seems a little more obvious to me because they're able to quickly analyze those things for the viewer. And as long as they can simplify that and make it understandable, which isn't always the easiest thing, they usually have some success there. So I wonder if there's kind of that same sort of value for new coaches in just having that awareness of what the team you just played for was running, and then what other players around the league's tendencies are as well from having defended them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have specific insight into that, but it makes enough sense. If you're a sharp mind who understands the game and you understand the current game, you don't have to, be out of basketball for 10 years and kind of learn the new style. And also, yeah, like these guys know these players because like JJ Redick played with players that he will be coaching and he will be playing against. And, how much does that matter in the long run? I'm not sure, but it doesn't hurt, I guess. And yeah, I think there's kind of the different paths. You could work your way up as a coach, or you could just say like, you know what, I think I've got the chops right now. And yeah, we've seen examples like Jason Kidd, Steve Kerr. I don't think had another stop before the Warriors, and he's been fantastic for them. And it's often the guards, right? It's who are the ones who are kind of trying to see the whole court at once and understand everything in real time. Obviously, there's like Patrick Ewing was a coach. Sometimes the center's a coach. Phil Jackson, but yeah, if you've got that basketball awareness and you can translate it, and the media side shows that you can translate it both to a national audience and presumably to your team, it doesn't feel like the traditional route. Some part of me still says like this is wrong. Like show that you can be a coach at the lower levels and then you work your way up, be an assistant, and then. But sometimes it works. So who am I to judge?
Last question for you. In terms of Warner Brothers Discovery, if in fact they lose the NBA, I've heard conflicting reports in terms of the future of TNT Sports as a network. Do you think what are the ramifications of them losing the NBA? They've gained some sports rights in terms of the college football playoff. They have AEW and their rights are coming up fairly soon. Like, what is kind of their landscape? Can they fully survive without having the NBA? Or do you think they're in a little bit of trouble? Like, what are the actual consequences of that if they do in fact lose the NBA?
Yeah, they'll be in an interesting place as a company. And there's kind of bad vibes right now. I think because they're losing, it seems like they're losing the NBA.
Yeah.
But as a business decision, like maybe it's the right one. I don't know. I try to be humble about saying like, well, if I were, the CEO, it's like, well, you're not. Like maybe there's a reason that you're not the CEO of this or you're the one calling the shots. Because the NBA is incredibly expensive. I mean, that's why. That's why they're going to lose it, is because David Zaslav and whoever else said, you know what, this is a lot of money. We're tripling the fee. We're not getting as many games. Like I don't know. Like maybe we don't have to have the NBA. And we'll see how it all shakes out. I think, I mean, you can kind of see these forces pulling at each other, but it all takes so long for anything to actually happen. I mean, we've been talking about this NBA media deal for 2 years or something. I think eventually we might see some kind of merger with another media company, like Paramount is also kind of floating in space. They're a more established brand. They have a broadcast network. They actually have a lot of streaming subscribers, but they're still, they're looking for a buyer. They're kind of figuring out their future. They're figuring out if they actually want a buyer. So it's, I think eventually we might see all of Warner Bros. Discovery or TNT Sports, or there might be some dividing up into the various factions. It might take a little more cord cutting. I think everyone's kind of like hanging on to their current revenue sources for a little bit until cord cutting like really makes this not tenable. But yeah, I don't think they will stay on in their current form. I mean, in like 5-10 years, I think something they'll have gotten more sports, or they'll have glommed onto something else, or the status quo doesn't seem like it's going to hold. Whether that means getting bigger or smaller or different, I'm not sure. But yeah, it feels like this is a big moment for them, and because if they are in fact losing the NBA, and I have to say that is still an if, because we could wake up to headlines tomorrow of, oh yeah, they've got a 12-game package, every year they're gonna, and they've even got some playoff games. Like that could still happen. They still have matching rights on this deal. It's sort of a little unclear what exactly that means, at least to those of us on the outside. But if they do in fact lose the NBA, even if they keep the NBA, everything's changing. It's moving slowly. It's like watching galaxies collide, but they will collide eventually, and whether we're not around to see it or not. And yeah, I think that feels like one of many somewhat legacy networks trying to navigate this transition and not having an easy time of it, because it's not an easy thing.
Well, hopefully we get a resolution soon. Owen, thank you very much for spending some time with us. Please let our audience know where they can find you on social media and any other projects as well as your great podcast you have.
Sure. Yeah. If you want to look me up on Twitter/X, I'm just Owen Poindexter. And yeah, I'd love it if people checked out our podcast, Front Office Sports Today. I host, we cover all the sports. We've certainly been on this NBA media rights deal for, I don't even know how long. But yeah, we're all over the place. Wherever it's sports and a whole lot of money, we're going to be there in some form. So yeah, check out Front Office Sports Today.
Awesome. Thanks very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Great to be on.